Hello everyone, and welcome to this next episode of Kelly's Quest. I am so fortunate today to be able to sit down with two friends of mine. Melissa and Max have both agreed to sit down with me to discuss this thing that I'm calling the ripple effect. In my world, little actions that people do outside of my realm, a lot of times come into my realm and impact my life in ways that I did not even know were happening. And such a ripple effect happened because of Melissa and Max. It is through them that when I met my wife Adina, she knew how to communicate through the lens of a transgender person's vocabulary. In other words, she had already seen a parent, Melissa, love her trans child, Max. And she saw this taking place, and she knew that this was something that it was love. And that love is the most important thing, really and truly, when you're building these relationships, especially with a parent and a child. And I'll always remember when I was on the disc golf course, the very first time I met when I met Adina, Adina said to me, "What do you do?" Because Adina loves to ask questions. She does like her questions. And she said, "So what are some of the things you do?" So I mentioned, she knew that I played disc golf because I met her on a disc golf course. But I also told her that I have a TV show, Kelly's Quest. And she goes, "Oh, what is this show about?" And this is the ripple effect right here, y'all. I said, I interview transgender people and their allies and all of the people in the world that I can think of that have impact on trans people's lives. And you know what she said to me? "I love trans people." And
she has loved my daughter since before my daughter was born. and she has loved me most of my life. So yeah, she was ready.
So that is the ripple effect that I'm talking about. Before I had ever met Adina, you all had caused this change in her that then rippled into my life with her. And so I am very grateful to the fact that you accepted your daughter, because sadly we know there's a lot of families that don't accept their trans children. And thank you for making the journey to self-discovery. And I would kind of like to start with you first, Max, about your journey just a little bit. Your self-awareness. Was this something that you've probed a lot in your life, or was this something that kind of snuck up on you through ripple effects of other people?
I'd say for most of my life, gender didn't really play that large of a role. And when I was about 10 or 11, I started growing my hair out, and I went to a camp where I didn't know anybody. And I was sort of so nervous and shy that when people started referring to me with she, her pronouns, I was too nervous to correct anybody. So for an entire 2 weeks, I was pretty much a woman. And I wasn't as upset with that as someone may expect me to have been. And then, a little while later, I sort of, as gender started to matter more and more as I got older, I realized that I didn't really mesh with my assigned gender at birth. And luckily I grew up with a really supportive family and a really supportive school and friend group, that the second I felt like it didn't match who I was anymore, I was able to sort of switch into the other one. I was able to become a woman. Well,
there was a little bit of it wasn't immediate though, because you first came out to us as gender fluid, and you were kind of saying that some days you felt more female and some days you felt more male, and we were, trying to follow along with that. And I should say too, she has not identical, obviously. She has a twin brother, and who is very cishet, and it was really interesting having these two people who had, they're 14 minutes apart, and they'd grown up together, and, they're going through these completely different pre-puberty and puberty journeys around sexuality and gender identity and what have you. Theo's a bit of a bro. he's a good guy, and he adores her. And he says, he's always said he doesn't care what gender she identifies as long as she's his Max. But those first several months, you didn't really come out yet at school. You know, she had come out to the family, and she was kind of experimenting with different clothing and stuff like that. And I remember, if you don't, very clearly, well, you can tell the story about how you came out at school. Do you remember, to Miss Tremblay's class?
Yeah.
Speaking of ripple effects, that was really...
It was morning meeting. We all did them like every day before class started. And one morning, Miss Tremblay gave me the floor, and I came out to my entire class, and they were all incredibly supportive. And I think that was sort of part of the school environment that I grew up in, was just sort of like, I think that was one of the things that made it harder for me to figure out that I was transgender, was that everyone in my community was so accepting and sort of had this very progressive view of gender that I didn't feel as pushed into it as other transgender people do. So I never really had any reason to think that hard about it. And yeah, it was wonderful.
I remember her teacher telling me about that later. She was so impressed with Max. So this was a Montessori school. So Max was in 6th grade, and it was a 4, 5, 6 classroom. And I remember at a parent-teacher conference, she said, I had no idea. She didn't tell me, not that she needed to or anything, didn't have to ask permission or anything, but she didn't say anything ahead of time, She just laid this out so eloquently. And she said some of the younger kids who, still see the world in very binary terms were like, no, that's not a thing. Like, you're one or the other. We don't understand. And she was so patient, and she just explained it and really brought them along. And then about 3 weeks into the summer vacation, we were all, the family, her brother Theo and her dad and me, were all working hard on language, trying to refer to her by the right pronouns, whatever they might be at any given moment, and kind of give her space to be whoever she wanted to be. And I can't remember what the subject under discussion was, but I said something about Max that kind of left her gender open, and Max said, rather quietly but very firmly, I am a woman.
Hear me roar.
And that was that. Like, okay. We heard her roar. But yeah, then I ran into the leader of the middle school team at Oak Meadow at a party later that summer, and I said, kind of casually, like, oh, by the way, you should know that Max has new pronouns, and I really wasn't thinking too hard about it. I just thought, oh, like, give you a heads up. And it's like 2 days later, we got an email from her and from the head of the school, and they said, okay, tell us how to support Max. And they were great. Remember that?
Yeah.
That is huge. And you said something that I found very thought-provoking for me about you were in this environment to where you're just Max.
Yeah.
However you present to the world, you're just Max. And I feel like what happens with my story was, as I was growing up, I won't say I was genderless, but I was a child. Mm-hmm. That knew that I was a girl, but I also didn't associate activities with gender. Clothing had no gender. What I played with had no gender. What I dressed like none of that had a gender to it. So as I'm growing up, I'm just frolicking along in life thinking, okay, I'm Kelly. Because my identity was formed early. Like, I think I was 3 years old, 4 years old when I knew something was going on with me. And I also understand it is very different for every single person on this planet, how their identity comes into being. So there's no right time for your identity to be known to you. And everything was going along fine. I was just seen as a kid. The world did not see me as a gendered anything. They just saw me as a kid up until kindergarten. And then all of a sudden you go from this, I'm just a kid, to no, you're not just a kid, you are this.
Girls line up on this side, boys on that side. Girls use this bathroom, boys use that bathroom. Yeah, you're right. That's when you really get hit with it.
And it hit me hard because at that point, I knew who I was as a girl. Like, and a lot of people are like, how did you know? Gender identity is a very complex biological set of factors that it happens. That's the best way to say it. It's like I could explain puberty to you and how puberty happens, but gender identity and puberty and all of those are different things. And what happened as soon as that descriptor of male or female was put out there, I got stuck because I no longer saw, the world no longer saw me the way I saw myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you were talking about just being accepted, that really resonated with me. It's be like, I think I would have liked a Montessori school because I would not have gotten stuck at that point.
Well, it's interesting because, she does have this, like I said, very, very cis brother. And Max wasn't particularly feminine or, it wasn't, when she came out, it wasn't like, oh yeah, I always knew that. I wasn't shocked really, but it wasn't something I'd thought myself ahead of time. But they are totally different people, and their self-expression and their I don't know when they were 9, 10 years old, if I would have thought to call it their gender expression, but in retrospect, their gender expression was always different. And because they were in an atmosphere where you could just kind of be whoever you were, there was no expectation that because Max was called a boy, she was supposed to do things a certain way or behave a certain way. And, she was not acting like Theo, who was playing boy correctly. There was sort of none of that. I remember in that meeting we had, it was really, really interesting to me. Oak Meadow approached it, the principal and the teacher, who was also the program director, approached it from such different points of view, both of which were important. The principal was very focused on the logistics. Remember that? Yeah. And he, the first thing he thought of was like, well, okay, the middle school is kind of a different part of the school than where she had been in upper elementary, and it'd be really easy to make those unisex bathrooms. It would be harder with the elementary, but I'm gonna go order unisex bathroom signs. He was all excited, that was a concrete change that he could make. And I remember Ms. Wright said to you, how do you want to play this? Do you want to make a big announcement, which is not your style? Do you want to, what do you want to do? Do you remember what you said?
Yeah, I think we decided on just everyone would say their pronouns. We would do icebreakers, first thing. So, what kitchen utensil do you identify with? And also, what are your pronouns? So we all went around, and I said mine, and that was kind of just that.
That is the way it should be.
Yeah.
You navigated the way it should be, which is a blessing.
It is a blessing.
It's a blessing, and it's also just the way it should be. It shouldn't be a blessing. It should just be that's the way it is.
Yeah.
And you said that you just kind of stood up in front of your peers on that day and said, hey, ta-da, here I am.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that was a creation of a ripple effect.
Yes.
Do you have any stories to share with how that ripple effect impacted other people in your community?
Yeah. Every time I've come out, there's always been at least one person who's very curious, has a ton of questions, and it's incredibly eye-opening. I remember when I came out to my family, my dad and I had a long conversation that night about gender, and he sort of thought about his own gender a lot. Like every time I've had this conversation, it's sort of allowed people to like think about something they've never thought of before. And I had this shirt because when I first came out, we went to a museum together. What museum was it in Boston?
Remember, I'd say the T-shirt and then it'll all run.
They had a gender exhibit.
Oh, that was at the MFA.
Yeah.
Yeah, the MFA did a wonderful exhibition on gender expression in clothing.
Yeah.
It was great.
And at the gift shop, they had this shirt that had a ton of different gender identities as they've been described. So like, demi-gender, agender, bigender, a bunch of other ones. And every time I wore that shirt until I grew out of it, people would come up to me and would like point to themselves on the line, be like, I don't really think I'm here. I think I'm more like here. And there was another kid who about a year after I came out herself.
So yes, I mean, you never know. You being yourself has this ripple effect of me and Adina. And has this ripple effect of that person that felt comfortable coming out. It had the ripple effect of you making your father think in ways about themselves that they had never thought about. I'm sure the same thing happened to you about that. And these ripple effects continue on. And these other people, we're all creating ripple effects. Everybody out there. Every time we do something, we are creating ripples. And Melissa, when you accepted your daughter, which is the exact opposite of my story of my family did not accept me. They were unable to make the journey with me, Max. There was too many barriers. There was too many religious restrictions on them for them to be able to make the journey with me. So their ripple effect on me was self-doubt and self-loathing. The ripple effect of your mother was self-love.
Yeah.
And that's a gift. And then you now are sitting here with us talking, and you're creating another ripple effect. But I am sure that there are people in your world that you've had to have decent, easy conversations with about this. And I'm sure there's also some conversations that have been a bit more challenging. But the ripple effect is the ripple effect.
Some of those conversations have been beautiful. I don't have a very close relationship with my brother. My brother's a pretty conservative person generally, both small and big C. And we're quite different. We've never been close. He has 4 kids, and I will say he's a wonderful father. He's very close to his children. And we were out to dinner. We don't see each other often. We don't live close together. And we were out to dinner with my dad and 1 or 2 of Jeff's kids. And Jeff said, so, Dad told me that Max is a woman. And wow, like that would be really hard for me to wrap my brain around. And he didn't say it judgmentally, just more like, gosh, that would be difficult for me to figure out what that means, It's like, I don't know. I don't know how I'd handle that. And I still get emotional when I think about this. His son turned to him and said, "Oh, don't be ridiculous. If one of us came out to you, you would join PFLAG so fast your head would spin," which I think is the loveliest thing a child could say to you. That, and this is a son who at the time was probably 35. He had such confidence in his father that whatever any of his kids told him, he'd be right there. And Jeff was like, yeah, I guess you're probably right. I guess you're right. And he's, my whole family, who all are, much more traditional and conservative than I tend to be, much less progressive, have all been fabulously accepting. My dad was 92, I believe. And actually I called Adina on my way to the restaurant and I said, having dinner with Dad tonight, and I'm going to tell him about Max, and I have no idea what to expect. Adina and I have known each other almost our whole lives, and our respective parents were extra parents for each other. So she knows my parents quite well, and she said, I have a lot of faith in your dad. Really do. I think he's going to be great. And I still remember, sitting across from him in the restaurant and saying, well, I have something to tell you. Max has determined that she's a woman. And he looked at me for a minute, and he kind of thought, and he said, okay, well, and then he kind of launched into this whole historical perspective, going back tens of thousands of years of human history, and how there have always been people who were neither cis nor het, and how they have always had a unique role, often an artistic role, from a very sort of like biological point of view of like, well, why would nature create beings whose reproductive and sexual and gender choices are non-normative? Like, and my dad had a lot of really good answers about like, makes perfect sense to him. And I I remember sitting across the room thinking, wow, that was an amazing perspective that I did not expect. And he, for the rest of his life, for however many years that was, 12, 13 years that he'd known my twins, we tended to refer to them very often as the boys. And so, lots of people in our lives had to kind of change that reflexive, oh, Melissa, how are the boys? To how are the twins? How are Max and Theo? And he would correct himself every time. He was so careful to get it right,
That's a fantastic story.
I
mean, it really is. It shows you all that if someone, how old was he?
I think he was 92.
92 years old, was like, okay,
yeah,
I love my grandchild.
Yeah, right.
And
He was like, okay, well, that's an interesting new thing that I just learned about my grandchild, and it totally fits in with how I understand the world. I was impressed, and Adina was right.
So you told your father this, and you are still working on who you are, because I mean, at that point, like, yes, I'm a transgender person, I'm a transgender woman, but I'm also all of these other things. Like, that's just an itty bitty part of who Kelly Schutzberg really and truly is. I'm also an athlete, I'm an educator, I'm a friend, I'm a person that loves nature. I'm all of these other parts of me, but because I got stuck at 5 years old, that part of my journey was always seen through the veil of not being my authentic self to the world, and the world not seeing me as my authentic self. So I was always navigating life knowing that the world didn't know the real Kelly Schutzberg. And I didn't know the real Kelly Schutzberg yet because I hadn't been able to introduce her to the world fully and unconditionally. So you've got a pretty good head start, I think, on knowing who Max is. But I want to explore some of those other parts of Max that aren't transgender, because there's a lot of, I know a lot of things about Max, and she's pretty darn amazing. So what are some of your things that you do that are non-transgender related whatsoever, that are just Max?
I love acting.
She's very good.
Thank you. I'm gonna go to college next year to become a glass blower.
What the heck is that?
Working with, 1,000-degree glass on the end of a steel pipe and turning it into bowls, cups, sculpture.
That's fascinating. So, fire.
Yeah.
I'm appealed to fire a little bit. I'm like, okay, I like that.
I told
she's already a pretty good glass worker. She's done a lot already.
I told my college counselor last year that I wanted to pursue glass blowing, and her first reaction was, "Oh, have you told your parents?"
Oh, come on, back up. That's not fair. The first thing you told her before you fell in love with glass was that you wanted to drive a truck and get your commercial driver's license,
Yes.
which we were also fine with. But it's something Max had been talking about for a long time, that she just thought it would be a really cool way to see the country. It would be to get her CDL, you know, and like get paid to go drive around the country. And she felt this was like junior year, and she felt like she didn't have it. You know, it wasn't that she didn't want to go to college exactly, and she's a really good student, really bright academically. She just didn't have any burning, like, oh, I want to go study this thing. And then you went to Corning that summer, to first Snow Farm and then Corning, and you did some glass stuff.
Yeah.
So the first thing she said to this poor woman who is supposed to like get all the kids into college was, yeah, I think I want to get my truck driver's license. And the woman's like, oh my God, the parents are going to be coming after me with tar and feathers. And then you came back at the beginning of the next year and said, glass blowing. And to her credit, she came up with half a dozen different programs for you to apply to.
That's amazing. I mean, that's being that journey of like when I was your age and I was thinking of professions and careers in school, I was so gender dysphoric that I was fighting my authentic self because the world didn't accept the authentic me. And the best way I could think of to navigate the world was not to accept the authentic me also. So I tried to get manly jobs, fight forest fires, let's go shoot guns, and let's go do all of these things that in my brain were manly things. They're not manly things. Anybody can shoot a gun, anybody can go be a park ranger, anybody can do any of that, anybody can be a truck driver. One of my dearest friends on this planet, if you do decide you want to be a long-haul truck driver, one of my dear friends, she's been doing it for years and she loves the job. It's her safety place. She's in this cab, she gets to see the country. So there's no gender to it, but in my brain, all of these things were gendered.
Yeah.
In my brain, glass blowing is gendered.
You know, it's interesting. I've also been interested in like carpentry and ceramics. So all of these things, you have to learn from somebody. And I swear to God, all of the teachers also feel the same way. So I think that's one of the weird things about going to any of these classes is sort of fighting against the patriarchy every time I take a glass blowing class. Sketch comedy, whenever I go to a class there, there's always, you know, a man who cares very much that he's a man and wants to talk over everybody. Carpentry, there are so many people who use it as a facsimile for their penis. Just and in all of these things, it's interesting sort of feeling sucked back into it, because there's still a part of me that feels like the root of masculinity. And like I said, I sort of grew up in a very progressive family, so I don't feel very strong attachment to it. But like whenever people start having like a dick measuring contest about like, you know, what they're building, their tools, anything like that, there's a part of me that like wants to join in and be like, oh yeah, well, you know, I made a 3-pound piece of glass. What have you done?
I think that's part of the patriarchy. I think you were absolutely right that's what that is, because I like the outfit that I have on. It is perceived as being women's attire, but in reality, it's just clothes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's just clothing. I like it a lot, but at the end of the day, all of these things are just things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then
well,
we've
and in
assigned
another
roles.
culture, that could absolutely be masculine attire, and so could what I'm wearing. You know, It just, I mean, it's completely culturally defined.
It really is, and I appreciate that you're navigating this world as Max and not being coerced into, like, I enjoyed forestry. I did, because I'm very much an outdoors girl, but I got into it for the wrong reason.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're getting into glass blowing for the right reason, because it's something you love doing. You're a creator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think for me, I have somewhat of a different, like almost the exact opposite sort of feeling of what I'm drawn to, which is that like because so many of my interests are like considered masculine, there was a part of me for a long time that was sort of worried about like, you know, because I'm a transgender woman, I have to try harder to be a woman. I don't sort of get to just be like, you know, no matter what I do, society will still perceive me as a woman. I felt the pressure of like, I have to keep my hair long. I have to dress as feminine as possible. Otherwise, I'm just a man who like is doing the bare minimum to pretend, you know? And I think sort of fighting back against that and like deciding that, you know, I still do love things like carpentry, ceramics, glass blowing, regardless of whatever those, and like, I love a lot of other masculine things too. Like I don't necessarily love feminine clothing or perceived feminine clothing. And sort of just being confident in like internal femininity enough to not have to present external femininity. I think that was a big part of like my journey.
That's a great journey.
That was a really interesting ripple effect for me. So when I suddenly had a 12-year-old daughter, I was like, what do I do with that? Do I have to buy everything like pink and purple sparkles now? Because 12-year-old girls are pink and purple sparkles, you know? Yep. And it really, I mean, as you were talking about Dad having to think a lot about gender, I thought a lot about what gender meant and what gender meant to me. And it's really interesting. To me, whenever people sort of push back and, you know, try to tell you that gender or sexuality or what have you are choices that you make, I always think like, oh, well, what made you choose to be straight? What made you choose to be the gender you're assigned at birth? And, you know, then they kind of go, I just am. And I've sometimes tried to slice that further because I'm bisexual, so I get attraction to men and women, but I'm super femme. And I just can't really imagine not feeling like the gender I was assigned at birth because I just am, you know, which both affirms the idea that we don't make choices about these things. We are who we are. Yep. But it also makes it hard to understand what it would be like to feel like you do or like you do, that you know, there's this disconnect between what you were assigned at birth and who you really are. I want to tell you about a little ripple effect I don't think I've ever mentioned to you. I was thinking about this driving over here today, and I was thinking about improv and how good you are at it, and how much watching her get really into acting and really think about acting and about comedy and about writing and about improv. And Max is a very analytical, thoughtful person, so she really dives deep into the things that interest her. And fortunately, she likes to talk about them, so we have really fascinating conversations. And I was thinking about improv, and you know, the classic improv prompt is yes and. So whatever you say, I say yes, and then I build on that. That's what I did when you came out. That was how I remember feeling exactly that way. Yes, and now what? Yes, and do I just hang back completely? How do I not try to push you into some, because I was really aware of that too, that like the pink, purple sparkles thing is a cliche and a stereotype and a trap, and I don't want to push you into like, oh, well, now you're a girl, so we're going to go to the children's place and we're going to buy everything that has glitter on it, you know? Like that's what girls do. So like, how do you make space for you to be a girl and figure out what being a girl means, and maybe like toss out a couple suggestions here and there, like, hey, it's okay if you want to go shopping, or we could, you know, we went to Sephora one day, remember that? And you were probably 13 or so, and you had a makeover, and you were like, okay, so that's what makeup's all about. All right. And, you know, we sort of said, you know, how do you feel about your name? And, you know, and that's something you've thought a lot about recently, actually, all along. And I was trying to kind of not push you in any direction, but just kind of give you an and that you could build on if you wanted to.
It's a fascinating journey when you are different than what society perceives you as. Like I said, I tried to be super duper extra masculine. Grow the beard, tote the gun, go four-wheeling, all of these things, because I thought if I'm manly enough, I bought into this thing that if I just try hard enough, I can crawl my way out of being a woman.
Yeah.
And I bought it, and I never could get out of that, so I would not like who I saw in the mirror, but the world liked who they saw. And I'm like, you want the world to not hate on you. Like, I don't like that when the world hates on me. It's hard.
Seems fair.
It's hard. And then when I affirmed my authentic self, that's what I like to call it. I affirmed my authentic self. When I came out to the world and said, this is who I am, I started this journey of hyper femininity. Well, that's not who I am either.
Yeah.
So then the world liked who they saw then, but it still wasn't Kelly Schutzberg, because I'm not hyper feminine. I'm a woman that likes to occasionally wear feminine clothing, but I am perfectly happy to throw on some coveralls and go play disc golf and get muddy. And I've learned a lot of people like doing that, whether they're men, women, non-binary, gender fluid, gender queer. It had nothing to do with it. It was my own not understanding that the world was putting these pressures on me, that I thought that's how you make it in life. And that's not how you make it in life. That for me, it wasn't. It was a miserable, miserable, miserable time. And what happened was, when I finally started, the pendulum would swing to here, then the pendulum would swing to here. And when it finally came towards, I'm not masculine, I'm not hyper feminine, but I'm on the feminine side, I'm like, oh, that's my lane right there.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Okay, I like this person. And it took a lot of work. So for you to, at your age, to have already navigated that and to understand it, I think that's a ripple effect that also came from your upbringing, your family, your grandfather, your surrounding. Those people allowed Max to be Max in all her forms.
And I think for me, one of the big things that helped me sort of navigate that was acting, because a lot of the roles that I felt more comfortable performing were masculine roles. The idea of sort of like navigating male comedy was easier. Whatever that says about playwriters and sexism, let that be said. But it was definitely like a lot of the comedic relief characters that I really thrive in playing were written as male characters. And I cared more about making people laugh and having a comedic role than I did about gender at the time. So since, 9th grade, in every play I did, I would audition for the male characters. And I think that was one of the big things that helped me feel comfortable with, I guess, the duality of gender, like the sort of idea that it doesn't need to be completely hyper feminine.
That's huge. That's huge. And you are a good comedian. I remember one of your plays that you did where don't break things. There was the ping pong ball. There was something, the clothespins.
Yes.
And I felt like it was theater of the absurd almost. And it was lovely. And you played the role very well. And people could buy into the role of the character.
Yeah.
Because you were playing it so well.
Thank you.
And acting is not easy. I mean, people think it might be, but it's not. I mean, there's a lot to it. I mean, I've tried to memorize lines before, and I'm like, but then they just come out stiff.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a talent. I'm glad that you found that. And
I
go
will
ahead.
say, though, that one of my favorite roles of yours was as Beatrice.
It's true.
You were fantastic. And I didn't, it's not a favorite role because she was female. You were just so freaking funny. You created this whole hilarious backstory for her, and you just played her so well.
And I think a big part of that was that I did care more about the comedy than the
Yes,
gender.
yes.
For most of the plays we'd done up until that point, all of the funniest characters that I wanted to play had been men. And then in this play we had done, The Plot Like Gravy Thickens, the character that I really found the funniest was a character named Beatrice, who's this kind of senile old lady who sort of just wanders around the stage saying nonsensical things and being completely ridiculous. And I remember even the theater director was surprised when I auditioned for her. But that's just what I cared about more.
Yeah.
And I remember actually almost every audition for the first few years, every time I would audition for a male character, when I would get cast, the theater director would come up to me and say, "Hey, we can gender bend this character if you want to." But I was completely fine. I just cared about getting to make people laugh.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's a level of comfort. We're getting close to the end of the interview, and I do want to touch on something heavy a little bit. Right now in our country, there is a definite push of using trans people as a scapegoat for power grabs and money grabs. And people are moving at breakneck speed. Today in Kansas, they just sent out a letter to all of the trans people in Kansas and said, hey, you got to give us your driver's license back because you no longer get to be who you say you are. And you being your authentic self, you being the mother of a trans person, you all are seeing the world. You're seeing the world as a mother. You're seeing the world as Max. And I just want to ask you, Melissa, what do you see your role in creating new ripples? Do you see new roles for yourself in creating ripples here?
In a couple of different directions. I've always tried to be as sort of open and accepting and just kind of out there about myself and my progressive views and my views about gender and sexuality as I can be. I realized a few years ago, I have a jean jacket with a whole boatload of progressive, gay-friendly, queer-friendly, trans-friendly buttons. I am always amazed when I wear it at the response I get. And I think, I'm this pretty, normal, middle-aged suburban lady, and I'm at Donnellan's, and I can't tell you how many times I've been in a retail environment, and this young person who looks to me like they're maybe in high school leans over and says, almost like they're afraid to say it in a full voice, "I really love your buttons." And every time I think, oh, I wish I could spend the next couple hours talking to you, because clearly this resonated for you, and I really wonder what your story is, and why do you feel you have to say that so quietly? And
Right.
So I make it a point to try to wear the buttons as much as I can, because I feel like I have no idea what those ripples are, but clearly just having this kind of normal everyday suburban lady out, proclaiming, hey, I am on your side. I believe you are who you are, whatever that is. So that's one answer. I never expected, when Max started looking at colleges, so about 3 years ago, it was not on my bingo card that half the country would be off the list because they would be literally unsafe. Her brother, who's a lot less politically aware because he doesn't have to be because he's a privileged white boy. He's a wonderful person, but he just doesn't, these things don't cross his radar really, I think, unless Max is kind of like, hey, dude, think about this. I remember he floated the idea of, he was looking at really good STEM schools, and he floated the idea of going to Rice. And my internal thought was, over my dead body, are you going to school in Texas? But you don't say that to your 17-year-old son unless you want him to fill out an application for Rice. So I thought for a minute, and I said, I would hate to think of you going to a college where your sister couldn't visit you for 4 years. And he looked at me like I was nuts, because he was 17 and he knows everything and I don't, And he's like, what are you talking about, Mom? And I said, well, and I told him a little bit about some of this. I mean, this is before the election, before Trump's election. Already Texas was like way far down the line.
Yep.
And so I told him a little bit about some of the restrictive laws that Texas had passed, and that I felt like it really wasn't a safe place for a trans person even to travel. And he kind of walked away, and that was the end of that. Never mentioned Rice again. And, things have only gotten more intense and more polarized since then. So I guess I feel like my role is to be as accepting and open of everyone everywhere. Like, I want to be the mom that my kids' friends know. My house is always open. If, God forbid, your parents aren't cool with who you are for whatever reason, I am. I am cool with you. And you can come be my kid anytime. And I have a lot of friends with children all over the country, and who are around this age, and we talk all the time about. And I have a good friend in Texas with a daughter a year younger than Max, and they never thought they would ever consider leaving Texas. They're like, her husband in particular hates change, never wants to leave Texas, and he's like, maybe we should go to Colorado because maybe we don't actually want to raise our daughter in this environment, So I feel like I have this incredibly privileged position to live in this blue bubble where I feel very safe, and I feel like my daughter's pretty safe. And I want to use that privilege for good. I want to be loud. I want to talk. I want to protest. I want to open my house. I want to send money to people who need help getting out of other places. I want to support trans groups that support trans kids, Trans Lifeline, things like that. And I guess this feels hubristic to say, but I want to set a good example as a mom who is absolutely on her kid's side, and I trust my kids. When my kids tell me who they are, I believe them.
That's huge. That's huge, because a lot of parents, they think of keeping their kids safe as, oh my gosh, you can't be that because it's so unsafe to be that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that with my family, a lot of that fear came from that. They didn't think I would ever meet anybody. They didn't think I would ever find a job. They didn't think I would ever be safe. And they didn't see that I was being harmed by not being authentic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can remember when I was like in my 20s saying, if I had a kid who was gay, I wouldn't care that the kid was gay. I just feel sad because I feel like their life would be hard. Not sad for me, but just like sad that they would have a harder row to hoe. And by the time I did have kids, I was like, nah, everybody's got something. Being gay is not easy, but it's not the worst. It's not what it was when in the 70s or 80s, It's a different world now. And then I had a trans kid, and I was like, okay. So I am going to have a kid who's really got the hard row to hoe,
Does it feel like a hard row to hoe?
Not with my community.
I love that.
That's
Yeah.
that's the answer. That should be everybody's response to that question.
I feel like I need to say that I need to like publicly thank the two schools you've been in for that. Because Oak Meadow, the Montessori school she went through from pre-K all the way up through 8th grade, and then Chapel Hill, Chauncey Hall, where she went for high school, both of those were environments that could not have been more accepting, could not have been more supportive. And I'm so grateful that she was in I felt very strongly. I don't know quite how to put it into words, but I felt like if we can like kind of give her this support and this supportive environment where she can just be, for eventually she's going to have to go out into a world that is a lot more hostile than either of those environments or than her family environment is. But hopefully by then she'll be so confident and so well armored that she'll be able to withstand those slings and arrows that I know are coming her way.
Okay, I'm gonna give you the last word for it. My question to you is: so you're planning on going to university or to a school for glass blowing? Do you see yourself as a trans advocate, change maker, just simply by doing this? Or do you just think, I'm a 19, 20-year-old person that's going to go off to college and that's what we do?
I think more so the second one. I mean, there are definitely still a lot of people within glassblowing who are the kind of traditional masculine dick measuring contest assholes, but there are also, like, especially nowadays since the studio glass movement back in like the 60s, more and more people are so incredibly progressive. I mean, like, a lot of the top artists, like the top sort of leaders in glass, are incredibly progressive, incredibly accepting, sort of pushing the pale. And I think that does come with what glass is as an art form. It's sort of an intersection of a lot of different things. It's scientific, it's artistic, it's historical. And I think it really does invite people who are progressive and who want to see a more progressive world.
And I'm assuming that your art will have no choice but to reflect who Max is. Like, by definition, it's going to reflect who you are. So what type of art is it? This is maybe won't work, maybe it will, I'm not sure with this question. But the type of art that you're wanting to create, is it big, huge pieces? Is it tiny pieces? Like, exactly what kind of art do you envision yourself creating?
I have always been a big fan of sculpture, and specifically lifelike sculpture. So, you know, a few years ago I took a sculpture and a ceramics class, and most of my projects were sort of reflections of like whimsy in nature. We had a project to make jars, and I made little eggs with little cracked eggs, with a little bird on top in like a little brown nest. And I think that's mostly what my art is just a reflection of my view of the world, kind of like an appreciation for the whimsy that's out there, for nature.
That's
I
huge.
think it's important to mention lore.
Oh, there is somewhat of an overarching storyline that a few years ago I made this massive rat with a crown, the Rat King, and it got stolen. And ever since then, a lot of my art has revolved around this trauma that I experienced of losing the Rat King.
The art must have been fantastic that somebody else wanted it.
That's what I like to tell
It
myself.
was fantastic. But she's also created, and because she's also a very talented writer, and she's also created a whole lore around the world of the Rat King and the history.
So what
and
the Rat King's out there doing right now and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Okay.
Yep, it continues to grow.
Well, I hope the Rat King returns.
Me too.
That would be a crazy full ripple effect cycle right there. Okay. Is there anything else you would like to share before we sign off?
I don't think so.
Okay. Thank you so much, Max, for being here. I really do appreciate hearing your words and hearing your voice.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for creating this platform.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. I couldn't have done it without the ripple effect of others. And Melissa, thank you. I look forward to going out for meals with you soon.
Thank you for making my best friend incredibly happy.
That it went both ways. Your
I
best
worked
friend
out.
makes me incredibly happy also. She does. But everybody out there, look for Max's work in the future. It's going to be out there. And if you see the Rat King, please get it back to us at ActonTV. She desperately wants this story to come full circle. But thank you all so much. And remember, go out there and be kind and do good in the world. That's all we ask. Bye.